This is not a pirate story. Let me say that again, because the framing matters more than almost anything else you'll hear about this incident. This is not a story about Somali piracy. It is a strategic data point, and it tells you more about the future of naval power in the Indo-Pacific than any white paper published this year. Here's the contrast I want you to hold in your head for the next several minutes. 5 Somali pirates in a small boat, 1 American destroyer that responded, and 3 Chinese warships, fully capable, fully equipped, fully within range that did nothing. One night, 1 ship in distress, and 3 different naval powers behaving in 3 completely different ways. That is the data point. That is what we are going to unpack. Because once you see what actually happened in the Gulf of Aden on the night of the 26th of November, 2023, you cannot unsee what it implies about the next decade of American naval planning. Section 1. What actually happened? Let's start with the facts, cleanly, before we draw any conclusions from them. On the 26th of November, 2023, a chemical tanker called the MV Central Park was transiting the Gulf of Aden. The vessel was operated by Zodiac Maritime, a London-based shipping company with Israeli ownership ties. That ownership matters, because it tells you this was not a random target of opportunity. There was a political dimension to the selection. The attack itself was straightforward. 5 armed men, a small skiff, an attempt to board. The crew did exactly what merchant crews are trained to do in this kind of scenario. 22 seafarers from 7 different nationalities retreated into the citadel, that's the hardened safe room inside the ship, designed to keep the crew sealed off while help arrives. And here is a fact worth pausing on. There was not a single Israeli national on board that vessel. I mention that not as trivia, but because it preemptively dismantles the lazy narrative that this was an Israel-targeted attack in the simple sense. The ownership was Israeli-linked. The people were not. The distress call went out through UKMTO, that's the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Centre, the standard clearinghouse for distress traffic in this corridor. And this is the part I need you to lock in, because everything that follows depends on it. When that signal went out, every warship in the region received it. Every single one. American, Japanese, French, Indian, and yes, Chinese. They all heard the call. What they did about it is where the story actually begins. Section 2. The Chinese response, and what it reveals. This is the core of the entire analysis. Everything else in this video is support structure for this one observation, so I want to build the case carefully. The Pentagon confirmed on the record that 3 People's Liberation Army Navy vessels were within response range when that distress signal went out. This is not speculation. This is not analyst inference. This is an official acknowledgement from the United States Department of Defense, based on tracking data they had no reason to release unless they were quite certain of it. 3 Chinese warships, in range, aware, and none of them moved. Now, the question any honest analyst has to ask is, why? What are the possible explanations? Let's go through them, because eliminating the wrong answers is how you get to the right one. Was it inexperience? No. The Chinese Navy has been running continuous anti-piracy patrols in the Gulf of Aden since 2008. That is 16 years of operational experience in this exact corridor, against this exact threat profile. They know how to do this. They have done it many times. Was it a lack of regional infrastructure? No. China operates a permanent overseas military base in Djibouti, less than 200 nautical miles from where this attack occurred. Logistics, fuel, command, and control, all of it sits right there. Was it a lack of capability? No. The Type 052 and Type 054 platforms the PLA Navy deploys to this region carry embarked helicopters, marine boarding teams, and the speed required to close the distance. They had the tools, they had the people, they had the training. Was it a lack of obligation? No. International maritime law, specifically the duty to render assistance under the SOLAS Convention and UNCLOS, is unambiguous. Warships that receive a distress signal within operational range are obligated to respond. This is not optional. So we eliminate the alternatives one by one, and we are left with the only explanation that survives the elimination. This was not a capability gap. This was a choice. And here is where, speaking as a strategist rather than a reporter, I want to be very direct. Chinese naval presence overseas is selective. It is deployed to serve specific Chinese political and economic interests, escorting Chinese-flagged shipping, evacuating Chinese nationals, projecting influence into ports that matter to Beijing. It is not deployed to underwrite the global commons. It is not deployed to share the burden of policing the sea lanes that every economy on Earth depends on. The assumption that animated 2 decades of Washington thinking the idea that as China grew wealthier, it would naturally take on more responsibility for maintaining the open ocean, that assumption is over. It collapsed in real time on November 26th. And anyone planning the next destroyer build, the next force posture review, the next Pacific deployment cycle has to start from that reality. Section 3. The American response. The ship that did respond was the USS Mason, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. And I want to be careful here, because the temptation is to turn this into an American hero story. It isn't one. The Mason did what a destroyer is supposed to do. That's the point, not heroism, but a functioning system. What I do want to highlight is who came with the Mason. A Japanese destroyer steamed alongside the American vessel in coordinated response. That detail is easy to miss and impossible to overstate. While 3 Chinese warships sat still, an American and a Japanese ship moved together. The Mason launched an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, closed the distance, and arrived on scene. The outcome was clean. The pirates surrendered without a shot fired. The 22 crew members emerged from the citadel unharmed. No fatalities, no exchange of gunfire. A textbook resolution. The contrast writes itself. Coalition action on one side, unilateral inaction on the other. That is the standard the international system was built to expect, and it is the standard Beijing declined to meet. Section 4. The Houthi dimension. Now the story takes a turn. And the turn is what makes this incident strategically important rather than merely interesting. Roughly 4 hours after the rescue concluded, 2 ballistic missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen, in the direction of the USS Mason and the vessels around it. The missiles fell short. They impacted the water approximately 10 nautical miles from the American destroyer. They were not intercepted in the dramatic sense. They simply fell short of their target. But I want to be careful with the language here, because this is where reporting gets sloppy. The missiles were not shot down. They missed on their own. And the threat was not theatrical, it was real. CENTCOM officially assessed the launches as a deliberate attack targeting the American warship. That assessment matters because it tells you the Houthis were watching, in real time, and chose to escalate. So within the span of a single night, 1 American destroyer faced a low-end threat from non-state pirates and a high-end threat from a state-aligned ballistic missile force. The same ship, the same watch, 2 completely different categories of warfare, stacked on top of each other. Section 5. The strategic lessons. Pull back from the incident and 3 conclusions come into focus. 3 conclusions that anyone serious about American naval policy has to absorb. First, the counter-piracy framework that worked from roughly 2009 to 2020 is not coming back on its own. That era depended on a kind of distributed great power cooperation that no longer exists. The United States is going to have to do more, with fewer partners willing to genuinely share the load. Second, the threat environment in critical sea lanes is now layered. Pirates and ballistic missiles are operating in the same battlespace on the same night. A single destroyer is being asked to perform 5 different missions simultaneously: anti-piracy, ballistic missile defense, coalition coordination, freedom of navigation, and crisis response. That is a profile our current force structure was not designed for. Third, and this is the one Washington has been slowest to internalize. Burden sharing with China is not coming. It is not delayed. It is not pending. It is not a question of the right diplomatic incentives. Beijing has shown you, in operational behavior, what its Navy is for. Plan accordingly. The frame to take with you. So the next time you hear a debate in Washington about how many destroyers the Navy actually needs, and that debate is coming, it is coming very soon, I want you to hold one image in your head. 1 ship in distress. 2 threats in a single night. 3 warships that did nothing. That is the world American naval strategy has to plan for now.